Do these questions ever wake you up in the middle of the night? How am I going to pay for the high cost of long-term care? What would happen to my minor children if something happened to me? If I was unable to make decisions for myself, do my loved ones know what my wishes are regarding health care? Should I have a last will and testament or a living trust? You're listening to Bulletproof Estate Planning with Estate Plan Stan, where we address these questions and many more. Estate planning is not just for wealthy people. I've made it my mission to tell everyone who will listen that estate planning is for everyone. Don't wait until it's too late. Your family will thank you. This is Stan Pierchoski of Pierchoski Estate Law, Pierchoski Elder Law, and I'm your host here on Bulletproof Estate Planning, and I am Estate Plan Stan. Hey, and that's how you can find me on the web. Some folks having trouble spelling my name, Pierchoski. I don't know. I've been spelling it all my life and haven't gotten it wrong yet. But anyway, you can find me easily on the web by just putting in estateplanstan.com, and or you can try and spell my name, but that'll get you right to my website where it has all my contact information. If you want to email me, call me, talk to me, that sort of thing. Hey, what a great week we've had weather-wise. I mean, it's nice and cool, at least for this time of year. So we had a little break in August, but it's coming back. It's going to be hot for another 4 or 5 weeks, I'm sure. Hey, listen, this is our Bulletproof Estate Planning, where we talk about everything estate planning. All right, let me tell you about some events that are coming up. And I'm going to spend a little time on these events because they're important. I've got two of my free educational seminars called Wills, Trust, and the Nursing Home are coming up. First one coming up is August the 25th at 2 p.m. That's going to be at the Star Theater on the Square in Pulaski. And then after the next one coming up is September the 9th. And that one's going to be at 2 o'clock. And again, the same day at 6 o'clock p.m. And that's going to be at the WLX Country Cafe in Lawrenceburg. Now, listen, if you haven't attended one of my free educational seminars, you really ought to consider it. Don't let a little drive, out of your way keep you from attending. It's a great scenic drive, and it'll be worth it. Now, these seminars are where I talk about subjects that you absolutely, positively will not hear about anywhere else. Do you think you need a will and that, will take care of everything? Well, if you have a will, your estate must go through probate. Don't know if that's what you had in mind or not, but it does. And probate is painful, and it's a very cumbersome process. So, all right, come to one of my seminars and hear about how a trust plan is a much better and easier way for your children or your heirs to handle your estate, and how it's 100% probate avoidance. Have you got the same question on your mind that I hear on a daily basis practically, which is, how do I keep the nursing home from getting all my stuff? Well, there's a way, It's called the Income Only Asset Protection Trust. Now, you can protect everything you own and that you've worked for your entire life from the catastrophic cost of long-term care, which in Tennessee averages about $8,000 a month. Do the math and see how long your estate can handle that level of bleeding, I call it. Have you got a loved one that's already in the nursing home and you're afraid you're going to lose everything? Well, the reason you're afraid is because you don't know what your options are. Everybody's going to tell you, if you talk to the guy across the street or you talk to your hairdresser, they're all going to tell you that there's nothing that you can do. Well, there is some things that you can do, lots of things. These are the things that I talk about at my seminars. Why am I the only one talking about these issues? Well, I don't know. I haven't been able to figure that out, but because no one else does talk about them, that's why I do. So I don't mince words. I don't dance around the issues, beat around the bush. I don't worry about what the nursing homes think. I don't worry about what TennCare thinks, and don't worry about what other law firms think. The way I see it, you've got two choices: do nothing or do something. It's pretty fundamental, right? Come to one of my seminars and learn about the something that you can do. But keep this statistic in mind, that if you do nothing, and doing nothing is a choice, not sure it's the best one, but it certainly is a choice. If you do nothing and you or one of your loved ones needs long-term care, 70% of you will become impoverished within 1 year. Now, that's a thought that ought to keep you up in the middle of the night. Does me. So RSVP for one of my seminars and you'll learn what you don't know. You can save your life's work, your life's earnings, your life savings. Listen, if this concerns you, and it should, don't wait until I have a seminar that's close to where you live. I mean, I get asked all the time, hey, can you do one of your seminars over here in Lincoln County, up here in Williamson County, Rutherford County, Marshall County? Can you do one here? The answer is yes, I can. I mean, but it takes time to put together. I mean, my team is scheduling these seminars in many of these counties, and some of them are already set, but it could be 6 months to a year before I get to yours or get back around to yours if you just missed one. So, um, you know, if if you want to hear what I have to say, just do this. Hop in the car, take a nice drive to where I'm going to be having the seminar. Stop at a Dairy Queen on the way, get a couple of Heath Bar Blizzards, and enjoy the trip. I mean, it'll be worth it. Okay, you won't be disappointed. Okay, let me go over this again. The next seminars coming up are August the 25th. We're going to do one that day at 2 p.m. at the Star Theater. That's STAAR Theater. It's right on the square in Pulaski, the biggest building on the square. You can't miss it. And then we're going to do one September the 9th. We're going to do two that day. I think that's a Thursday, 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. at the WLX Country Cafe in Lawrenceburg. That's right on the main drag in Lawrence County. Both are a nice drive from wherever you are in the country. Nice summer day to come. But so anyway, and by the way, we've not started the social media of advertising for these yet, and we're already getting some RSVPs. So don't wait. I mean, usually get a pretty full crowd when we have these. So don't wait. Call my office at 931-363-7222 and RSVP for one of the upcoming seminars. So, okay. Listen, before I get into what I'm going to talk about tonight, because I'm mostly going to talk about guardianship, something I think is very overlooked, underused in estate planning is guardianship for minor children. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about, I'm going to tell you about it. Somebody that came in my office and something they brought up. And that was a fella come in and said, he hears me talk about trust all the time. And I don't make any bones about the fact that I'm biased. I mean, I think trust is the greatest thing since sliced bread as far as being able to do something. Will is a good step in the right direction, but it's a small baby step. There's so much more you can do with a trust plan. So I talk about trust, I talk about probate avoidance and all that. Well, I had a gentleman come in and say, hey, I see where you can go on a friend of mine went on LegalZoom and he did a last will and testament and he did a trust in his will. He said, so, why do we need, what you do? So, well, here's the answer to that. He's right. He's right. You can put a trust in your last will and testament. It's called a testamentary trust. The difference between a testamentary trust and a living trust is, well, you guessed it. The living trust is one you put into effect now while you're alive, and a testamentary trust is one that doesn't take effect until the moment you die. Because remember, when I talked about wills, will is a non-operative document, has no legal effect whatsoever until the moment you die. Then it springs to life. Now, if you remember, and I'll talk about this again in a future show, but if you remember, when you have a will, when you have your distribution at the end of it, when you're giving all your stuff to who you say it goes to, it's what we call an outright distribution, meaning you can't put any terms or conditions on it. If you want to do something like that, let's just take a trivial example and say you got a spendthrift in the family, and you're going to say, you know what, I wanted to get 10% of an inheritance every year for 10 years. You can do that in a will by setting up a testamentary trust. Now, the court will set that up and it will appoint somebody to be the trustee over it, and they'll deal with that for 10 years as they distribute the property. Now, here's the big difference. When I talk about trust, I'm a big fan of probate avoidance. Probate is a pain in the neck. It's long, it's cumbersome, it's riddled with duties, deadlines, and responsibilities. It costs a lot of money. It takes forever. So I like trust because they are probate avoidance. Now, when you open up a trust in a will, or what we call a testamentary trust, let me make no mistake about it, you can certainly do that. But the first thing you do is probate the will, you open up a probate estate, and then the probate court establishes the testamentary trust. And the biggest disadvantage is the probate court will now monitor that trust for the life of the trust. So if you have a testamentary trust, you're in probate for 10 years with the example I gave, because somebody's got to monitor that trust and the probate court is going to do it. And they're going to require an accounting every 6 months, something like that, whatever the statute calls for. And so you're going to be in probate court, or your heirs are going to be in probate court, administering this trust for 10 years on that example. And that's a pretty common example. Now, and you have to deal with anything associated with probate, which means it's a it's a court invasive process. And, you may have adverse parties that you have to constantly give notice to, and all those accountings you got to do, you circulate among everybody, make sure they approve of everything. So my question is this: if you can set up a trust, a living trust, and avoid probate 100% completely, and that sounds like a good plan, because when you hear me talk about it, people say, well, that sounds like the ticket, because, my kids don't have to go through probate at all. They just administer the trust, and it's 100% probate avoided, probate free. That's right. So if you can do that, why in the world would you also do a trust, which is a great tool, but why would you do a trust that has to be opened up in probate court? I mean, it takes probate court to open it. So, a testamentary trust is 100% you get probate. A living trust is 100% you avoid probate. It's a big difference. So you can do it. So don't get me wrong. That gentleman was correct. You can do a trust in your will. That's right. A testamentary trust. It's been doing it for years. I haven't been doing it for years, but it's, hundreds of years of testamentary trusts have been set up. But the big difference, like I said, is, there you are in probate court for the duration of the trust. The probate court will monitor that from the day it's open to the day it closes. Depending on what you put in it, it could be a long time, a lot of money, a lot of people involved, that sort of thing. So anyway, like I said, he was right. You can do a testamentary trust in a will, but why would you? Why would anybody want that? If you want that, that's great, but you need to know and understand. Don't think like this guy when he said he thought he was putting up a trust in a will, and he was getting what I'm always talking about. Okay. So that's not what I'm always talking about. I talk about the stuff that avoids probate, not thoroughly entrenches you in it, because the trust has to be made by that court. So I'm about to talk a little bit about guardianship. If you've been listening to me for any length of time or come to one of my seminars, we talk a lot about long-term care, going to the nursing home, trying to protect assets from the nursing home, pre-planning, crisis planning, Medicaid planning, that sort of thing. But there are some other aspects to estate planning. We talk about all of them. And one of the ones that I think is very overlooked is guardianship for minor children. People tell me all the time, they say, well, look, if anything happens to me or my wife, Aunt Gertrude would take care of the kids. Okay. Well, and maybe Aunt Gertrude will, but that's not guardianship. That's not the ability to keep those children and raise them for, until they're adults, if something happens to you and the mother. So you got to have a plan. It's part of your estate plan is this guardianship for minor children. Now, if you're sitting here listening to me and you say, well, we don't have any minor children. Well, maybe you don't, but maybe you have adult children who have minor children. Okay. So listen to what I have to say with that ear, and maybe you might want to pass this on to them, because it's a big deal. Lots can happen if this is not put into place. But I'm going to explain how it goes into place and what happens and what the statutory requirements are. So if you have minor children, if you're a husband and wife or a single parent, you have minor children, minor meaning under age 18. Now, I'm not talking about special needs children or anything just yet. If I have time, I'll get into that toward the end. But minor children, let me ask you a question. All right. What would happen to your children if you didn't come home tonight? Wherever you are, let's say you're at the grocery store, you're out with some friends, you're out, who knows, what would happen if you didn't come home tonight? Let's take an example. Let's say you're out to dinner, you and your spouse for, a much deserved date night, and your young kids are at home with a babysitter, which is typical. Babysitter could be Aunt Gertrude, it could be, a paid babysitter, doesn't matter. And on the way home, the unthinkable happens. Okay. You're in a car accident, which has rendered you both either incapable, deceased, or incapable of communication. Now, how's anyone going to know that you have minor children at home? If people respond to that accident and you're unable to communicate, I imagine they'll find out eventually, but that's something that needs to be determined quickly, right? Now, when you told the babysitter, so we're going out to eat, we'll be home by 10 or 11. Okay. Now, what's the babysitter going to do? When it becomes midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, and, does the babysitter know what to do when you don't show up when you're supposed to? And, and when she can't reach you on your cell phone? Okay. So she's calling you frantically, can't find you. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. You're like 4 hours past the date. She doesn't know. She can't get hold of it. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't have any instructions. I mean, the instructions you probably said was, then he comes up, call me and I'll help you. Can't find something, call me. If the kids are acting up, call me. So if there's no instructions are left, what's the babysitter going to do? I mean, she's going to be forced to call, the police. Now, when the police arrive and they discover that there are minor children involved, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to ask the babysitter about her authority to be there. And she's going to say, hey, man, I'm just the babysitter. And they're going to realize right away that that's not guardianship. That's not any kind of legal authority to take care of those kids, other than for the extremely short term, I guess you could call it a contract, to babysit for several hours while you're gone. Okay. So they're going to have no choice but to involve some sort of protective services, child protective services. And believe me, they hate doing that. I know a lot of the policemen. I know our chief of police here have spoke to him, some time ago when we put together what we call the child protective program. And, they sort of blessed it off because they're like, when they find out there's some place for these kids to go, they like, take their hand and wipe their brow and go, thank goodness. Because they hate taking these kids to child protective service. But, if there's no place to take them, that's what they're going to do. So now let's say that's what's happening. You got these kids, 2 or 3, at their home. It's 2:00 in the morning, right? And put yourself in the shoes of your children. Now they're being, woken up in the middle of the night, probably being woken up by complete strangers and being taken away from their home and placed into, protective custody, right? And you're not there to tell them that things are going to be okay. I mean, that's the reason this is being done, because you're not there. Nobody can really tell your children, where you are, because they don't know. They don't know about, what's been taking place, or you've been taken to the hospital or what. So just imagine, you got an 8 or 10-year-old child, and just imagine the fear, imagine the anxiety, imagine what the heck is going on feeling that these kids are going to feel, at that point in time. And then maybe a little later on when they get the news of a missing parent, while strangers usher them, into the car and take them someplace. They don't know where they're going. They don't know why they're going. They don't know when they're going to get there. Don't know what it's going to be like. I mean, their entire world is being upside down. And, kids are, I've got 3 of them. They're all adult now, but they're creatures of habit. I mean, they like routine big time. So if you're a parent, you've probably thought about this. If you hadn't, it's probably, it should be a thought that keeps you up in the middle of the night. What would happen if something happens to my kids, if I wasn't here to take care of them? So, you've got to ask yourself, have you done anything to prevent this, all too common scenario, that I've just talked about? Well, that's the topic for today. That's what we're going to talk about a little bit. How to ensure that your children never, and I mean never, spend 1 minute in the arms of strangers, because, that can really mess people up. I want to tell you, I think on my first show, I gave a little bit of history of myself and what I used to practice a lot of criminal defense work, but I used to get a lot, as an attorney, I'd have to do my share, and part of my share was taking court-appointed cases for these dependent neglect cases in juvenile court. Dependent neglect is just like that. When you have a parent that either doesn't take care of the kids or can't, or is deceased like this, you have to deal with these families where this happens to them. And I'm here to tell you that messes these kids up. And I don't know if they ever get over it. I mean, I don't know if some of them ever do. And they don't need that kind of life-changing event that's going to stick with them, because sometimes it makes them bitter. It makes them angry. They just feel like they got shafted and short end of the stick. And I get it. I mean, there's not a whole lot somebody like me or somebody like you can say to them to make them feel any better than that. So anyway, the goal is we don't want them to spend not even 1 minute in the arms of strangers or the care of strangers. So let's start off with what guardianship is. Okay. In Tennessee, we call it guardianship. And I'm not talking about adult guardianship. That's called conservatorship. And I'll talk about that in another radio show. But guardianship is a legal arrangement in which a responsible, authorized adult agrees to care for someone who can't care for themselves, right? Guardians are usually, used for children who don't have parents, or don't have capable parents, or have deceased parents, and for some adult kids with special needs, but we're not going to really talk about that tonight. So, like I said, seniors can need guardians too when you start getting dementia. We're not talking about that sort of guardianship. We're talking about minor children. So When a child needs guardian, or you got some children that needs a guardian, a court-approved guardian normally has to take physical control of the child. And then that person is then responsible for the upbringing of the child and the physical and the mental well-being of the child. And guardians, essentially, it's not custody. It's not the same as custody. It's guardianship. But really, they've got the ability to make decisions like health, school, social, financial, daily financial decisions for the child. Pretty much in essence, the guardian for a minor stands in the place of a parent. Pretty much the same thing. So, okay, that's guardianship. And I want to discuss two different types of guardianship, okay, that every parent should have in place. And we want to talk about the process of protecting the children within your estate plan. This is something that should be in your plan. We call it the Child Protective Program. And it addresses just this. So if your children are grown or if you have aging parents, pay attention to this. Listen to this, because you may have heard me talk in a previous show about something called the filial responsibility laws. And this ties right into it because, your kids can get strapped with your healthcare bills, but we'll save that for the end of the show if I got time. And I went over that a couple of weeks ago. So anyway, let's start with minor children. Let's start the discussion by the documentation that's necessary for guardianship. Now, there's two kinds. I break it down into two categories. I call it short-term guardianship or temporary guardianship and long-term guardianship or permanent guardianship. What's the difference between the two? Well, think of it this way. You may have in mind who you would want to take care of your kids if something happened to you, right? Well, and it may be somebody, perfect person, your sister or an in-law or somebody that's the perfect person to take care of your kids. Problem is they live in, Arizona. Okay. You're here in Tennessee, they live in Arizona or Oregon or, someplace like that, pretty far away. So for them to take guardianship is not going to happen overnight. I mean, because with guardianships, if you're deceased and somebody has to raise these children for the rest, until they become the age of majority, then pretty much is what's going to happen. They're going to have to make arrangements for the kids to go to where those guardians are. And that's going to be their new home. And that's going to be their new kind of, parents, so to speak. So, but that won't happen overnight. So we need a temporary guardian, somebody that can respond, like the babysitter thing I told you about. We need somebody that I define a temporary guardian as somebody who can respond within 20 minutes, 30 minutes. That way, when the police shows up, somebody's standing there with documentation in hand. They say, I have the authority to take these kids over until we find out what's going on with the parents and stuff like that. So anyway, that's what temporary is about. It's important. If your long-term guardian is right down the street and they're the same as your temporary one, then that's great too. You don't need a temporary. Okay, so I've been talking about guardianship for minor children, very overlooked aspect of estate planning. Don't think Aunt Gertrude or somebody's just going to pick up the ball and take care of your kids if something happens to you or you and the other parent. All right. When you name guardians, here's something you need to keep in mind. You can go through these documents I'm going to talk about where you name a temporary guardian, you name a permanent guardian. But all guardianship in all 50 states, all guardianship ends up with a court order. Okay, so why do we put together the Child Protective Program? Here's why. The statute in Tennessee for guardianship says, okay, the court will issue an order designating who the guardian is going to be, either temporary or permanent. And then the statute says, okay, the following are things the court will consider. Now, the very first thing on that list is if the deceased or if the parent had previously and or during life designated someone to be the guardian. Okay, and there's more to that. If you look into the history of the statute, when they discussed it, they want the court to put great weight on that very first choice. That's the first priority choice. And the reason is this. They're going to put great weight on it and they're not going to disturb it unless there's some compelling reason that the court should ignore what the deceased said they wanted to be their guardian. Now, the reason they put it that way is because they will assume if you went to the trouble of designating a guardian, they're going to assume that you gave it some thought, you looked at the different people, the person you chose is the person you want. And if that person changed or you decided there was somebody better during your life, you would have changed it to that new person. So, they're going to give the deceased parents choice of guardian is going to be paramount to them. So the statute says the very first thing they're going to consider is, had you designated someone during life? And the court is going to put great weight on that. Like I said, it's going to take compelling interest. I mean, you have to show that that person is just a total loser and a total non-guardian, and somebody's just going to screw it up and do a terrible job. Tough row to hoe, hard burden to carry. So if you name somebody, I'm telling you, it's going to be like a 99.9% chance and slam dunk. That's who's going to get appointed. So, but it, make no mistake about it, it does result in a court order. I've done quite a few of them, even with my guardianship plans. I had one I did right here in town where it was kind of a deathbed visit. This poor gal had developed a very aggressive lung cancer. And the sad thing was she never smoked a day in her life. I mean, I don't know, secondhand smoke or what, but it was just terribly unjust. But it was very rapid. She was definitely on her deathbed. They told her she had like 30 days. The family called me and said they don't think it'd be as many as 10. So we actually went there, and she had a 12-year-old child, and we put together a child protective program. Just this, guardianship. Okay. Well, I think somewhere around 8 or 10 days, we got the phone call that she had passed away. So then we put that, I think it was the sister. We took the sister into court. We petitioned the court for the guardianship. And it was a very short and sweet hearing. We showed the court that the sister was the proper person. She was named by the deceased. Nobody in the family showed up to contest it. Everybody thought that was a good idea too. And it was just a lick 'em stick 'em sort of thing. The court signed an order and guardianship was established. So guardianship does require at the end a court order, but don't worry about that. We can stack the deck heavily in our favor by doing these appointments that we're going to talk about during life. So I said earlier that I like to break guardianship down into two categories. One, temporary or short-term, and the other one is permanent or long-term. Now, the reason I call it temporary or short-term is because you need somebody that can respond immediately. So let's just take this scenario I gave. You're out on date night. You think of what happens on the way home. Let's say you have an accident. All right. The babysitter needs not to call the police. The babysitter needs instructions to call the temporary guardian. Okay. And they call the temporary guardian. Let's say it is Aunt Gertrude. She's 15 or 20 minutes away. She can show up, take control of those children. Now we call the police. The police show up and say, what the heck? What's the matter? And they say, the parents they're 4 hours late. We don't know what happened to them. Aunt Gertrude says, I'm here. I'm an established or designated temporary guardian for these children. I'm taking them into my possession temporarily until we figure out what's going on with children. The police will be happy as a clam at high tide. They don't want to have to send those kids off to protective custody. So then they go start looking for what happened to the parents. So that's the way that works. So short-term is somebody that can be there right away. Now, suppose, Aunt Gertrude's also the one you want to do it till the children turn 18. Well, there really is no difference between short-term or long-term for you. But suppose Aunt Gertrude's there and can be a great short-term guardian, but the people you really want to have as your guardian is, let's say, your sister. And like I said, she lives in Arizona. Well, it's going to take, a couple of weeks, I don't know, maybe even a month just to kind of put stuff together for them to get ready to receive the children. And as far as the children to get shipped out there, because that's where it's going to be. I mean, they're going to have to go to where the long-term guardian is, right? And live there. Now, none of this is ideal for the children, but we're talking about the next best thing. I mean, they're not going into the arms of strangers. At least they're going in with people that you picked, people that understand the values you want to raise the children with. Suppose you want to homeschool. I mean, you want somebody that'll do that, right? I mean, that's important to you. Suppose you have certain health and medical and dietary concerns for your kids. I mean, I know I did. I took the position, drinking sodas is not a good thing for anybody, but everybody drinks some, but I didn't let my kids drink soda probably for the first 10 years of their life. I figured they're going to drink plenty in their lives, but you're not going to do it when you're little kids, as long as I'm doing it. So they didn't. So you may have dietary concerns, that kind of thing. But you have peace of mind knowing these kids are going to be left with somebody that you've picked, the person you want. It's not you, it's not ideal, but it's your next best choice. And it's not some strangers is a total and complete crapshoot. Now, I'm not trashing the child protective services. I mean, those are very nice people, and the foster homes are usually good people, and they're very magnanimous in the fact that they will do that. But it's a paid position. There's more than one foster child there. I mean, it's sort of a mixed bag, and it's a rough experience for the minor. Any way you slice it. Like I said earlier, some of them just don't get over it. So, all right. So that's the temporary. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about, it's an important thing to do and how you choose. How do you know who to choose? A lot of people will say, well, I know who's going to take care of my kids, and they have somebody in mind, but the person you may think of right off the bat may not be the best one. Okay. And one of the things I like to tell people is when you're trying to figure out who you want to pick as a guardian, I suggest that you take money or wherewithal out of the equation. In other words, let's say you have I'm going to tell you a story here in just a second. You got a relation or an in-law or a sibling or something that's pretty well off. And you're thinking, well, I think I'll send them with that person because, they got plenty of money and, it won't be that much of a burden for them. Because, you may, I had 3 kids, maybe you have 6. I mean, if somebody's going to inherit 6 children to take care of, they need to inherit some money to go with it, right? And, if you are a responsible parent, and I know you are, you have something like term life insurance. That's exactly what term life does. It stands in your shoes, at least financially, and, steps in your shoes financially to take care of those children. If you have life insurance, that can go with those kids and help the person that's taking them, help, pay for and raise those children and deal with their daily needs and wants. But what you got to worry about is if you've got a large, if you are responsible and you got a nice fat life insurance policy that goes with these kids, there's probably going to be some folks throwing their hat in the ring because a lot of money comes with them. Okay. I can't think of a delicate way to say that, but let's just get to where the rubber meets the road. And that's exactly what happens. At least that's what we see happen in this office. If somebody knows a $250,000 life insurance policy goes with these children on the death of the parent, they're going to say, hey, I'll take care of them kids. That's just the way it is. Money brings out the worst in people. All right. Now, before the break, I was talking about how do you decide? How do you decide who it's going to be? You might say, okay, I know right away it's going to be so-and-so. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of a thought process. I'm going to go through it kind of quickly, but you can sketch it out. First, I'd suggest that you select a short list, create a short list, name about 5 people that, that you would consider. Now, here's the category of people, potential people, parents. When, parents are they're of limited time. They're older than you. So, you have to think about that. Parents, siblings, friends, aunts or uncles, cousins, godparents, nieces and nephews, maybe even college roommates. Because remember, when I say college roommates, we're trying to get into the thin pickings, but anyone, let me say that again, anyone is better than foster care. And again, I'm not bashing foster care, but I'm bashing the effect it has. Okay. It's not, it's non-ideal for the child. So that's the group you pick from. Then I want you to go pick your top 3 parenting values. Okay. What parenting values? I'm going to name a handful of them. Potential for love, relationship with you, a willingness. How about religion or spirituality, morals, marital status, location, integrity, ethics, education, parenting style, age of children, activity level, values, educational choices, ethnicity, heritage, temperament, age. I talked about that. Personality, work choices, relationship with children, financial resources. I said you should probably be last. And I think you ought to just take that one out of there when you're trying to make. So match your short list with the parenting values. Okay. You got a short list of 5 people. You got parenting values, match those up. Okay. And that's how you get to your list. Okay. Now, when you're dealing with couples, I said marital status is something you ought to consider. A couple serious mistakes people make is they pick a couple as their guardian. Now, you may want a couple, and that's okay. So you might say something, if you want John and Jane Doe, you can say in the documentation, John and Jane Doe serving jointly or the survivor thereof. Now, suppose you really want Jane Doe to be the guardian. I mean, John's okay, but given a choice, you probably wouldn't have picked him. Well, if you name John and Jane Doe serving jointly or the survivor thereof, and something happens to Jane, guess who you're stuck with? John, which was not your big choice, right? So we might want to say John, and you're okay with John as long as Jane's alive and married to him. But so we might want to say John and Jane Doe jointly only, serving jointly only. Or you could say Jane Doe serving alone or John Doe serving alone. So those are some mistakes that are made when picking. I've seen some horror stories where, they wanted Jane. They really didn't want John at all because he was a terrible person. Jane got killed in the car wreck, and now the only person there's John. He's got these kids. He doesn't want them. You didn't want him to have them. And it's a recipe for disaster. So anyway, After you do that, we got guardianship forms to complete, and then we'll know um, how to designate that. So, all right, now when I'm talking about selecting guardians, I'm talking about both short-term and long-term. Just keep in mind that short-term, is just that, if that's the case for you. So, now how do you inform someone that you've named them? Well, we send them a letter and we tell them that this is what we ask them to do. Where do you keep the documents? Well, in the letter, we tell the folks where we keep our estate planning documents and, where the authority is for you. Now, temporary ones or short-term guardians, obviously we present them with the paperwork. So if they are first responders within 20 minutes, they've got the paperwork in hand, right? Now, talk about permanent guardianship. It's pretty much the same, how you choose them, the same basic philosophy. Where we keep the documents. And it's what we call our child protection plan here at Pierchoski Estate Law. It includes both temporary and permanent guardian assignment forms. And what we also do to round this out is we have these wallet ID cards that you can do. What are they for? Well, if you're in a wreck, you're in a car wreck or something, they're going to, they're going to look through, they're going to look at your wallet because, for one thing, they're trying to figure out who you are. They're going to come across this little wallet ID card that lets them know that, hey, listen, I've got minor children at home. And if anything's wrong with me, if I have to go to the hospital or I'm unconscious or if I'm dead, call this number, which is my temporary or my permanent guardian, right? And it directs those people to do. So there was a classic story. I don't think I have time to tell it, but where a gal went to the gym and had an aneurysm that, how those are ticking time bombs, and something happened to her. And, hours and hours and hours went by before they could figure out who she was, that she even had kids, where she lived. I mean, it was a nightmare, something like this. We also, part of the child protection plan here at Pierchoski Estate Law, we give you these instructions for the babysitter, something you can stick right on the refrigerator. It's like a card, post it on the refrigerator. Why is that important? Because it tells them what to do. It says, don't call the police first, call the temporary guardian. You explain to them why that's a better way, because you've already got that set up. Now, the babysitter should be happy with that because it's a definitive plan of what to do. Okay. I mean, if you're babysitting and you don't have any instructions, it's like, now what do I do? You got to make it up. Don't let them make it up. Make the decision for them. It's now kind of like a system. Okay, if something happens to us, if we're not here, call this person, get them over here. Then that person knows what to do when they take. Now you've secured the kids. Now you can move forward with the bad stuff that's going to happen after that. But the kids are now protected. So anyway, okay. So, and again, we send out sample letters to those folks and we let them know that they're in those roles. You certainly want to know that somebody's going to accept the job. You want to talk to them, talk to John Doe and Jane Doe and say, look, if something happens to me, I want to name you guardians. Is that okay with you? And you need to know that because you don't want to surprise somebody, because you can't make somebody be a fiduciary like a guardian. I mean, if you name somebody and don't tell them about it or never really felt them out to see if they would agree to that, when that day comes, they might say, look, man, I don't want the job. I don't want the responsibility. And so the court won't make them do it just because you named them. As a matter of fact, that would be the compelling evidence that they would need to not pick the person, not order the person you chose in the guardianship appointment form. So talk to them, make sure they're willing to do it. If they are, then that's great. Then you can designate them. We'll let them know. We'll tell them where the documents are, that sort of thing. And that's what we do with the child protection plan. And that's what guardianship is all about. A lot more to it than that, but only got the hour to talk about it. So if you have minor children, okay, if you've got minor kids, don't let them hang out there if something happens to you. Don't put this off because, we're talking about an accident. Accidents can happen at any time. I mean, I always say, an accident won't happen to me because I'm careful. Well, I am careful, but even at the most careful people, bad stuff happens. It's not always in your control. Take driving, for instance. I'm a pretty careful driver. Being an attorney and all that, I'm an officer of the court, so I don't speed. I lock my cruise control in 55 when it's 55, and I take it down to 45 when it steps down. Everybody passes me, but I sort of have to. As an officer of the court, I'm bound by to follow the law, and I don't mind a bit. So I'm a careful driver, but I can't control the other drivers that don't pay attention to the speed limit, can I? So if I can't control them, then that's a recipe for an accident, and something could happen. That means my fault or my carelessness. Heck, I fell off a ladder back in 2013, and that was my fault. I thought I was being careful, but I wasn't careful enough. I could have got killed, but I didn't. I just broke my leg in a million pieces. But anyway, that's guardianship. We just wanted to go over that. If you want to talk about that more, call my office. We'll get into the details of what you might need, that sort of thing. So, all right, listen, we're coming up on the end of the show. I don't know where the time goes, but I've had fun talking about guardianship, and a very overlooked aspect of estate planning. If what you heard this week has piqued your interest, I'm glad. My mission is to get the message out that when it comes to estate planning, you have options, lots of options. If you have any questions about your own circumstances, I'm more than happy to take the time to answer. You can call my office at 931-363-7222 or send me an email at stan@pierchoskiestate.com. That's Stan, S-T-A-N, at Pierchoski estatelaw.com. Visit my website and check out where I'll be giving my next free educational seminar. My website is www.pierchoskiestatelaw.com. Thank you for listening to Bulletproof Estate Planning, and I am Estate Plan Stan.